guy that knows him, I can reach out to him. As a matter of fact, the guy I know is in the club was with him at the game. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 27th meeting of our club this year. As you recall, we just had that song, Imagine. Imagine what this is going to look like when we get back. It's all going to be different. It's going to be light. The chandeliers are going to be gone. We just talked to the club manager, and he said it's going to be literally an 8-week project. And so, as you know, we'll be out of here, and we'll talk about that more later. But imagine it'll be, they're even getting new tables and chairs, so the complete renovation. Anyway, please take a few minutes to meet and greet your fellow Rotarians and guests. I guess I can get this going.
Retain the paneling and just swipe the wall.
I don't know. I do know. I don't know. Lori knows more about that part. I do know they're going to lighten everything up. I think panel's coming down. So, but I don't know. I'm speaking out of turn when I say Mr. Construction Man. Good to see you come.
Yeah, good to see you, man. Welcome.
Hey, Sarah, can I ask you a quick question? Since you're future president of the task force, what are the steps in your Hey, quick question. You know, normally when we do the installation, kind of we're at a place that's somewhere we don't ever go. Like some past we've got a city stuff when we never went there.
Yeah.
The fact that we're going there so much.
I honestly, I have no qualms with going to find those.
Okay.
But I mentioned that because I actually know what you mean, and I mean, with shows knows that he's there, and plus it's
No, I get that. I just think that I think a lot of people maybe at that point be kind of wore out on it. But I mean, I'm just throwing that as a
It's
thought.
a good point, because when we discussed it, we didn't really feel the gravity of it.
Yeah. 8 weeks. Just got confirmed.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah.
And it could be probably 10, it's all said and done.
Welcome. At this time, please return to your seats and remain standing, and Leo Avila will lead us in prayer and the pledge.
Good afternoon, y'all. Do we have any concerns? Anybody have any concerns? All right, let's bow our heads. Lord, please pray for all our Rotarians, current and in other clubs across the world. We'd like to pray that we have a productive meeting today. Please pray for our guest speaker, for all those that have suffered tragedy or going through hard times. Most recently, the people in Syria and Turkey that went through the earthquake, the people in Ukraine, and all other people that are praying for needs. And let's pray that we have a great meeting today. And now we'll go with the pledge.
Play ball. All right, it's at that time to share any joys, and Richard Stanford, or no, Scott's here. Anything anybody's happy about today?
Happy's happy.
Happy's happy. Of course she is. Here you go.
Thanks, sir. Test two. Happy's happy.
Well, I'm sure you can't guess what I'm happy about. Go Chiefs!
Thank you. Barb?
I'm happy to have two very special guests with me today, and they'll introduce themselves in a minute.
Okay.
Eric Harrison.
Eric. Okay. He's getting ready for the next one.
Mark Neese.
Mark?
So for fellow scouters in the room, my son, who had earned his Eagle Scout about a year and a half ago, but for those of you in the room that are familiar with scouting, there's a organization within scouting called the Order of the Arrow, which is the basically National Honor Service Society of Scouting. And the highest honor that you can receive in that organization is the Vigil honor, which usually is only given to people who have put in years and years and years of service through the OA, basically staffing and running camping programs for their local organization. And my son was just nominated for Vigil honor, so he's going to go and get his Vigil in April.
Outstanding.
Thank you, Mark. Congratulations.
Any other happy news anyone wants to share?
Anybody else? Last
Seeing
time.
none, it's that time to introduce our guests. So if you're a guest, please stand and be introduced.
Let's start with the young ladies.
My name is Peyton, and I just turned 10 on February 11th, and I love to play with slime and mini brands, and I love to hang out with my sister. This is my sister Addison. She's 6 years old, and she loves unicorns, and she likes to play with stuffed animals.
That's pretty cute right there.
I'm Chuck Eisman from the Richardson Rotary, the Monday Noon Club, and I appreciate your hospitality and thank you very much.
All right.
Great to have you here, Chuck. Thanks for your visiting. Herb?
Yes, I'm pleased to introduce you to a 33-year-old friend of mine who's my guest at 33-year friend, not 33-year-old friend. Anyway, my guest, Rosemary Carter. Please welcome her.
Scurry?
I'm pleased to introduce my friend Tyler Vandenberg. She's with an entrepreneurial family that's got a large humate program and it's for soil remediation and enhancement. She's from Dallas originally, and happy to talk to you about that issue if you want to talk about that after the meeting.
Thank you. Did I cut you off too quick? You sure? Okay. Nothing
You
else
sure?
to say.
No?
So I have the honor today to introduce three distinguished guests. First, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, former senator of the great state of Texas. Michael Granberry, one of our speakers today, feature writer for the Dallas Morning News. And Burk Murchison with Murchison Capital, also one of our speakers today.
Great.
Thank you, Herb. Anybody else? Back to you.
Thank you for all the guests that are here today. Next up is Eric Harrison with this week's advertiser.
Thank you, President Jeff. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Today's marketplace advertiser is Mr. Kyle Marmillion with Marsh McLennan Agency. In a time where we faced unprecedented challenges, Rotarians have had to embrace the abnormal and deliver messages of strength, vulnerability, and resiliency. Like the Rotary Club of Park Cities drive to make a positive impact in the community, Marsh McLennan Agency is driven by a passion for being there for our clients, colleagues, and communities in the moments that matter. As a full-service insurance brokerage, we work closely with the North Texas business community to develop comprehensive programs and solutions to meet their business, insurance, and employee health and benefits needs. MMA, which is what the cool people that know what Marsh McLennan is say, MMA, I happen to be in the know, combines also their personalized service model of a local consultant with the global resources of the world's leading professional services firm, Marsh McLennan. For more information, please reach out to Kyle Marmillion directly to have a discussion about how MMA can be a valuable partner to you and your business. Thank you.
Next up is past President Happy Franklin and co-parade chair Jill Jordan with a couple of announcements.
Hi there, happy Friday. On your table, there's a couple different flyers. So the first one is for Rotary Means Business. It's the district's networking happy hour that happens quarterly. So this first one is going to be February 28th from 5 to 7:30 at 12 Cuts Brazilian Steakhouse. Check out the ratings. really strong ratings on the food and the beverages, so we'll want to check it out. I'm really excited about that. Bring your business cards. If you're retired, you still have stuff to talk about, so everybody is welcome. And then the second handout, we've just rolled out the details for the district installation on Thursday, June 29th at the Park City Club. It's going to be really fantastic. There's some really great sponsorship opportunities. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
As you all know, we've been working on the theme for the parade. We had 18 people submitting 53 different ideas for it. Last week we voted on it, and so drum roll. The theme for this year is Freedom to Serve. Thank you, Jeff SHEEHAN, for that idea. So everybody congratulate him. So Freedom to Serve, yay! Let me remind you all of one other thing. We need the ideas for who the Grand Marshal should be. So remember, email your ideas to Cleve Clinton. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right. You all received an email from me this week. I think it was pretty clear on the changes that are upcoming with our regular programming. So we just got an update from the club manager, and they will in fact be closed for 4 weeks. And in the second 4 weeks, they're going to do their regular dining services up here, so this space will not be available for us. So we have planned the next 6 meetings will be at Park City Club. Not here, they'll be at Park City Club. It's really important that you pay in advance, because if you show up and you haven't paid, there might not be a plate of food for you, okay? You can pay $5 to sit, and that covers the cost of the water and the tea and the parking, so that's important that you pay that $5. But I know it's a little bit of an inconvenience. I am thankful to happy and be able to get these reservations to be at one place for all of the time rather than bouncing around. The 7th week will be Good Friday, so we will not be meeting on that Friday. And then the following week, it should be a celebration in a bright, new, lightened place here at Maggiano's. I'm excited about the renovations. It is a little bit of a hassle for us, but I'm glad that we've made accommodations to meet somewhere else. So, again, please register and pay online. I think that it was posted or is going to be sent out by Happy. All of the weeks will be there, so just make sure you click for the right week that you're paying for. And I think each week there will also be one for just that week as well. But it's real important. Appreciate everybody's patience on that as well. Any questions on that? This has been a big deal for us working on it behind the scenes. So, but I think.
Question, Jeff, but I want to thank you for going through this period of time and setting it up and being thoughtful about everything, so that we do have a regular place to go to. So I thank you for doing that.
Well, yes, Pam.
Anyone who hasn't been to Park City's Club, it is free parking.
Actually, we're being charged for that. It's free. You've got to get your deal stamped. They are charging us $1.50 per car.
You mean when we each leave, it's $1.50?
Yes.
It's included in.
It's included in our fee. So when you show up and you get your ticket, just make sure you go to that front desk and get it stamped. Actually, it doesn't even matter if it's stamped or not. They just let you go out. But it is included. So, but we're paying for it. And really, I know you all thank me, but really, I've got to say thanks to Lori Aldridge, because without her, we couldn't have gone through this and thought of all of the things, and she's made a lot of calls to other places as well. So a big hand for Lori and all of her help. All right, it's that time for our weekly raffle drawing. As those who have been here before know, the money that goes into this pot will ultimately be raised for our Rotary Club of Park Cities Foundation. So what's going to happen is we're going to ask one of our speakers, either one of you can draw the winning ticket. If your ticket gets drawn, then you'll have the opportunity to come up here and draw a card from a deck of cards. If you draw the ace of spades, you will win half of the pot. If you lose, it's your souvenir. Just know that if you lose, those cards are removed from the deck, so each week the odds of winning improve. We're up to $529. Okay, the last four numbers are 7178. Here we go. John Whaley. Let me make sure I get all the cards out of here, including the ace of spades. Oh, nine of diamonds. Thanks to everybody for participating. Really appreciate it. At this time, I'm going to ask Herb Hammond to come up to introduce this week's program speakers.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon. After watching last Sunday's Super Bowl, I'm sure that many of you had the same thought I did. Maybe next year. And although the Cowboys haven't been to a Super Bowl in more than 20 years, they are still the third most successful NFL team, and they are the most valuable NFL franchise. And all of that started back in the early 1960s with Clint Murchison. And we have today two speakers who will talk about Clint Murchison and the beginning of the Cowboys, Clint's son, Burk, and Dallas Morning News feature writer, Michael Granberry. They'll talk about the history of the Cowboys and their new book, Hole in the Roof. And at the conclusion of the program, you'll have an opportunity to meet Michael and Burk and to buy a copy of their book if you'd like to do so. We've set up a stand over there on the wall where you come in to the room. So without any further explanation being necessary, please join me in welcoming Burk Murchison and Michael Granberry.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. They're going to write the call. Okay, do you want me to start off? Thank you all so much for coming here. I mean, we're so grateful to you for doing this. This has been really one of the most pleasant things about this experience is we've spoken to quite a few groups now, and we're so honored that so many people have embraced this book, and we really appreciate that greatly. I assume that everybody here is a Cowboy fan, right? So, you know, we interviewed 150 people for this book, all on the record, and one of those was Cowboy great Dwayne Thomas, and I think he made a great statement once about the Super Bowl that I think all Cowboy fans should remember. If it's the ultimate, how come they're playing it again next year? At least we have that, right? We are so honored today to have Senator Hutchison here. Thank you so much for coming. Ray Hutchison was one of those 150 people we interviewed, and he was so terrific. And for our very first signing, which was at the Hall of State, there is this high school friend of mine who showed up who likes to call himself the mayor of Pleasant Grove, even though Pleasant Grove has no mayor. So this is a big step up for us, really. Thank you so much. You know, we actually wanted to start off talking about Mr. Hutchison because one of the things, I've actually been a reporter now for more than 50 years, and one of the things I've enjoyed about that is you get to meet so many interesting, smart people, and he was right at the top of that list. And he was key to the history of Texas Stadium. So I just wanted to read you a couple of things from the book, which I think may say it the best. Hutchison turned out to be what bosses would call a gargantuan hire. He alone hatched the financing plan, which, as he put it years later, was a no-brainer. Quote, Texas Stadium ended up costing $31 million, but not a single dime of taxpayer money was involved. Irving had no money, so we needed to get creative, he told the Dallas Morning News. Boyle, what was Boyle's title?
Boyle was he was the attorney, city attorney
Right.
for Irving.
Called Hutchison, quote, the most innovative public finance lawyer to ever practice law. Boyle noted that Ray drafted a plan of financing from scratch, which is highly unusual because bond lawyers almost always rely on what's been done in the past. Clint Jr. and the city of Irving followed Ray's plan, and it worked exactly as he predicted. And yet, obstacles ensued. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission had passed a rule that skeptics believed would derail Irving's seed option bond plan. Hutchison and Boyle flew to Washington for a meeting with the SEC's general counsel. Quote, for 1 hour, Ray laid out his position for the general counsel on why the rule didn't apply to Texas Stadium, Boyle said. It was some of the best lawyering I've ever seen. When Hutchison finished, according to Boyle, the SEC's general counsel leaned forward and said, we've worked on this rule for 10 years, but in 10 days, you have found a hole large enough to drive a truck through it. As the News noted in a 2012 article, the SEC gave Irving its waiver, and Texas Stadium became the first large complex to be built using seed option bonds. Burk, before we I'm going to ask you a question in a minute about seed option bonds and how they relate to 2023. But why don't you just elaborate on the role that Ray Hutchison's plan played in the history of the stadium?
Well, first off, I'd like to say we both interviewed Ray and early on, and he was, given the magnitude of his, what he did for the stadium in terms of the plan and whatnot, he was just so humble and understated and just, you would think somebody like that would have a whole different temperament, but he was just soft-spoken and just couldn't have been nicer and more helpful. So I'd like to say that. But also in terms of what Dad and Irving were faced with was that Irving, as it turned out during the negotiation, ended up wanting to own both the land and the stadium improvements itself, which meant that it would need to be provided through a municipal type financing. But they also, in addition to their other demand, their first demand, they also were stating that they would put no tax dollars into the stadium at all, which meant they really had to get creative with respect to how the money would be raised. And it was Ray that came up with the whole seed option bond, which laid it up. It required that the people that went to the game, the season ticket holders, the people that wanted to own the seat or go regularly and be sick, would have to buy bonds that secured seats. And between the 30s, I think there were four bonds with a face value at $300 each, but were discounted to $250. So it was $1,000 a seat in order to secure the rights to buy season tickets through the, going forward. And outside the 30s, it was $250 a seat. And Ray, conjured all this up, and it was brilliant in the sense that, when you look at it, most of these stadiums are actually underwritten by the taxpayer generally, even though many of those taxpayers never go to the games. But in this case, it was the people that went to the games that paid for the stadium, and it was just brilliant, and it was one thing that really just set the stadium apart from any other major sports facility that's ever been financed and constructed.
This might be a good time to talk about, I thought it was a brilliant concept, and as a journalist, I love the fact that it did not involve a penny of taxpayer money. And one of the things we tell the people we meet with is our title, Hole in the Roof, to a large extent has a double meaning, because we think that there are some things about the current National Football League that concern us and concern us greatly. And one of those is the role of the stadium in contemporary society. I mean, to give you kind of a counterexample to what Clint Jr. did with the help of Ray Hutchison, the new stadium in Buffalo, New York, I understand that they love their Bills, but the new stadium in Buffalo, New York, which will be an outdoor stadium, is $1.5 billion, which is more than the cost of AT&T Stadium, and at least 90%, close to 100% of that will be taxpayer funded. So I thought this was a very fair way to do it. Economically, it was a very egalitarian way, because the users paid for the stadium, and certainly in today's dollars, I mean, the cost was minuscule, and also the people who bought those bonds, they eventually did get the money back, right?
Sure. I mean, it was just like any bond. It was payable over, I think it was worked out 38 years or something. And instead of being paid back through tax revenue, it actually was paid back through the revenues generated by the stadium itself, which meant, it was incredible. There was an operating contract. Dad controlled the management of the stadium. That was part of kind of the deal he made with Irving and kind of the trade-offs. And so he controlled that. But at the same time, he was really hamstrung, because the priority had to be to repay these bonds. And so all the revenue, he had an operating contract, and all the revenue is kind of like a waterfall effect, where you pay expenses, including a management. His only take and benefit from the thing was a small management contract, payable annually, and in a small participation and concessions and parking. But beyond that, all the revenue that flowed to the bottom line went to paying off the bonds from the very first day. And so it was, I mean, for him, it was an incredible, tied up a lot of capital for a long time, but he was so committed. He's committed to doing a new stadium and but anything really, the whole thing was to do anything except go back to the Cotton Bowl to play, which, that's a whole different story. But it was something that for him, it was just a necessary thing, and he sacrificed for it.
One of the themes of the book is that how Texas Stadium became the prototype of the modern stadium. I think aesthetically, the Astrodome was a major turning point, and for that reason we have an entire chapter in the book about the Astrodome. But economically, Texas Stadium was a huge turning point. Prior to that time, almost all stadiums were city-owned facilities to which the sports owners paid rent, in some cases a lot of rent, and they were incredibly old. In 1966, which was the Cowboys' first winning season, which ended with the Cowboys playing in the National League Championship game on January 1st, 1967. The winner of that game got to go to Super Bowl I, which was against the old Dallas Texans, the Kansas City Chiefs. But what was astonishing to me as we were doing the research, the Cotton Bowl was built in 1930, and at the time that Clint Jr. started advocating, pushing for a new stadium in downtown Dallas, the Cotton Bowl was one of the newer stadiums in the National Football League. And a lot of teams played in baseball facilities. The Bears played in Wrigley Field, which had a seating capacity of 47,000. The Detroit Lions played in Tiger Stadium, where the Detroit Tigers played baseball. But the Philadelphia Eagles, I know that's your favorite team, played in Franklin Field, which was actually built in the 1800s. And but as you know, they pretty much all have new stadiums now, and this search for stadiums is like a rampant virus now. That's the #1 priority in sports. just before I left to come over here, I read an article that Oakland, California is about to lose its next major league team. It lost the Warriors to San Francisco, which still plays in the area. It lost the Raiders to Las Vegas, and now it looks as though the A's, baseball's A's, are also going to move to Las Vegas, to a multi-billion-dollar stadium. But elaborate a little bit on what exactly was your dad's vision? Many people called him a visionary, and he could see that player salaries were going to escalate. I don't know that he knew they were going to escalate this much. But what are the ways in which Texas Stadium became the prototype of the modern stadium?
Well, he had lived when he acquired the franchise and started up the team. At first season was 1960. They were playing in the Cotton Bowl and continued to play there through early in the season in 1971. But he saw that stadium and and he had attended many games previous to that there with SMU and whatnot. But he just saw the thing as appalling in terms of the way it was maintained. The city was spending no money on to keep it up to standards and whatnot, and it just, to him, it was really it's kind of an insult to him and to the fans and to the team, and they just deserved more. He felt like, particularly the fans, and so that was one of the big motivations in terms of the new stadium, was to build something that provided a level of comfort and service to the fans that had not existed, like plenty of parking. Parking that's close into where you'd end up parking people's backyards outside Fair Park and things, and then so plenty of parking, seats with backs on them that were placed in, had great sight lines close to the field, just everything in terms, and then also just when you think about protecting the fan from the rain and the elements during, but his thing was he wanted to keep the elements. He felt like the elements were part of the game itself, so the whole took care of that, but in terms of protecting the fans. So all this thing was with the spectator in mind, was the priority. And then beyond that, he saw an opportunity there, rather than having a lease facility where there was, very little. The Cowboys were just a lessee and had some small percentage of concessions and parking and stuff, but very minor. But he saw it as it could have the potential of being a profit center for the team itself, and for him, and that's what, when in negotiating with the city of Irving, what he gave on was owning the land, owning the stadium. He gave a lot, but one thing that he was in return, what he gained was probably his main priority, which is to own the operating contract for the stadium throughout the times that the Cowboys were there, and he viewed that as a tremendous upside, and that is what has garnered the interest of a lot of these teams, when they realize that, I don't have to be a lessee. I don't necessarily need to own the stadium, but I can operate and I can make a pile of money doing that. So it's just a separate profit center that's become really important to these teams.
In other words, he felt, I think he was enough of a visionary that he could see that the then current sources of revenue were going to tap out. Television revenue would level off at some point. But also, I think the player salary thing, he was wise enough to realize that was going to go crazy at some point, and teams were going to need a new source of revenue. Let me ask you about this, though. At the time this proposal was made about how to finance the stadium, it was controversial. I don't believe the news media at the time did a good job of explaining it. Imagine that. But there was, so I don't think a lot of people understood it, and I think there was an emotional reaction in a lot of quarters. I mean, as I said, I grew up in Pleasant Grove, which has long been a working class community, and a lot of people there kind of bristled at the idea of having to do this. There were lawsuits, right?
Well,
in other words, talk about the challenges your dad
I mean,
had.
when Dad, he negotiated for, and his primary goal was actually to do a new, initially was to do a new stadium in Fair Park to replace the Cotton Bowl. But then through through his business and things that took him, he began to look elsewhere and realized that over in surrounding the central business district, over to the southwest kind of quadrant of that, where the Omni Hotel is now located, there was, a lot of property readily available that was then used for like rail yards and things. It was, and that it would have afforded the possibility economically to build a stadium there. And so he began to push that, and he wanted to not only build a stadium there, but he also wanted to move the Performing Arts Center, from Fair Park, and the museums. He wanted to develop like a sports cultural complex in downtown Dallas, which just been, at the time, would have been, in hindsight, would have been fabulous. But he could get there was just went to war with Eric Johnson and Robert Cullum, people that were tied to the Fair Park and its future, and wouldn't give an inch. And it was only with that he began to shift his focus and move towards, initially looked at Arlington, and at the time it kind of shows you how the city of Dallas has changed, or the metropolitan area anyway, but he felt like at the time that was just too far to have his fans drive. And so he ended up, through contacts he had in Irving, finding that location in Irving and beginning to work towards that. Maybe I've gotten away from your question.
Well, no, but it's also, it really underscores, absent Ray Hutchison's plan,
right,
what would he have done?
Well, I mean, he got frustrated one time. He began to, after they shut the door on him more or less at Dallas with Eric Johnson and whatnot, he began discussions, and initially the discussions, he got really, really frustrated and kind of blurted that, I don't know what to do. I may have to move the team to Oklahoma City. And it was, kind of a crazy thought, but it just demonstrates the level of motivation he had to leave the Cotton Bowl behind and move to another location. But fortunately, Irving worked out for him.
One of the people that I interviewed for the book, who I don't think we ended up using this quote, but I've heard it from other people as well. He was a word that you heard about some of the innovations that Texas Stadium introduced was that he introduced a stratification. And one of the great things about journalism is if you thoroughly report something, you can kind of see what the real truth is. And it's really an unfair criticism of Texas Stadium. First of all, Texas Stadium was not the first stadium to introduce luxury suites. The Astrodome, which opened earlier, 65, I think, had a ring of what they called small skyboxes at the top of the stadium. And then your dad and Tex Schramm had both been to Aztec Stadium in Mexico City, and they really liked the way that
that was interesting. Down in Mexico City, they have the Aztec. It's been there. It was built, I think, in the early '60s, and they actually had suites on. And their level they were set up because the field itself was subgrade, and so actually you could drive your car up to the entry of your individual suite, park and walk in the suite and watch the game from there. I mean, it's pretty fabulous, but he didn't quite make that at Texas Stadium. But at the same time, it kind of inspired him and got him thinking about that. But along the stratification line, you also have to remember that they had the two levels of circle suites, and there was a total of, I think, 178 suites. And they seated 12 people, plus a bartender if you want a bartender, but you got 13, but 12 in there. But 12 times 178 is what, 3,000 or 4,000 people.
Well, the exact figures are in the book, but we added it up. And Texas Stadium had more than 65,000 seats, and just a few more than 2,000 seats were in the luxury suites. Right. So basically, you're talking about 63,000 seats that were not part of any quote-unquote stratification. And also, one thing you told me and our documents revealed that blew me away was the luxury suites alone. They cost $50,000 each when they opened, right? Those alone funded 1/3 of the stadium.
Right.
Is that right?
So it was an important source of income or revenue to offset the cost of the stadium itself. But overall, when you talk, I mean, Dad, he tried to just make he bent over backwards to serve the spectator, and the prices of tickets were absurdly low when they first. I think general admission was like $8, and not general admission, but reserve seating was like $8 a ticket, and a little less for general admission, and then parking on they had to run kind of revenue schemes and stuff to predict what kind of revenue would be produced by the stadium in order to pay off the bonded debt. But they, and in doing that, their first run through, they were charging $1 a car for parking, real up close. It was great parking. The numbers didn't work, so they went to $2 a car. So I mean, it's just that kind of demonstrates. He wasn't really out to make a financial killing. He just wanted to get make people happy, get people out there, and while making it affordable, also pay for it.
And at some point, the bonds and the revenue from the luxury suites, it was not enough. He had to write a check from his own checkbook for how much to finance the stadium?
He ended up the sale. They had to really move. They were getting a lot of pushback from the city of Dallas, from everybody. There were these nuisance lawsuits that were going on that were really potentially affected the startup of the stadium, the startup of the construction and things. And they were just, the state highway department was throwing things at them. There was just a lot of influence, behind the scene influence, that were making it very difficult. And so, they just had to start and run, because they felt like if they lost any momentum, that they would crash and burn. And so Dad, just to get things, I think through the seat option bond sales program, they raised $5 billion from the public. But to get started, they needed 10. So he bought $5 million of bonds himself, the seat option bond. And then that went on for a while, and then there was another, I think the city and then Dad came up with $7.5 million each, so you're up to like $25 million. That still wasn't enough, and Dad had to come up with an additional $6 million, to buy the bonds to finish up the stadium. So it was at the high point, he probably had $20 million in it, and eventually, kind of the sale of seat option bonds, spectators and whatnot, kind of caught up and reduced his investment to like $11 million, but it was still like money just was stuck there for like 30 some odd years or something. It's quite a sacrifice.
And in terms of the emotional, the aspect that emotions played in all of this, after the stadium opened and people got used to going to it, they liked it quite a lot. And I can really relate to this. I was actually in college at SMU when the stadium opened, and our interviewee, Dwayne Thomas, scored the first touchdown. Beautiful afternoon. They beat New England 44-21, I think. So more than they've beaten.
You have a good memory.
More than they've beaten New England in the past. But anyway, the one thing that Clint Jr., I believe it was, introduced that he kept throughout, actually this lasted until Jerry Jones left the stadium, but with a twist. They had these Cowboy Flyer buses, which I believe that Dart was maybe not in charge of at first, but it became a Dart deal. And for people like in my old neighborhood, they would go to a shopping center almost within walking distance of their house, and for $5 round trip, they would get to ride this bus, and it would park right next to the stadium in the blue parking area. It became like, it developed a culture of its own. You had the same friends over and over who would go, and it was a blast. And after Mr. Jones bought the team, he kept that until he left Texas Stadium, but he made all the buses leave the blue parking, and they had to park in a lot by the University of Dallas, which was quite a ways away. And it could be a little bit of a trick on an icy day to get from that parking lot to the stadium. But one thing that happened when the whole thing with Texas Stadium ended was there was such a culture built up, among the fans at Texas Stadium, and particularly tailgating. And there was a documentary film, I can't remember the title, but if you Google it, you can find it. Fans were grieving when Texas Stadium closed because they would take the buses and they would drive their cars and they would tailgate in the parking lot. And it was the same kind of emotion that surrounded leaving the Cotton Bowl. It was the same way when they left Texas Stadium. Before we move on to the talk about stadiums today, and then move on to the Q&A, I just wanted to mention one thing. I became the full-time arts writer for the Morning News in 2006, and it was really amusing to me to do the reporting and be writing the thing about Clint wanting to bring the arts as well as a stadium to downtown Dallas. They didn't like he got no support at all from the mayor at the time or from Robert Cullum about having a stadium in downtown Dallas. None whatsoever. To the point that, frankly, it reminded me a little bit of the Brooklyn Dodgers situation when they wanted a new stadium. The power figure in New York City at that time, who later became the subject of a Robert K. Rowe biography, was a man named Robert Moses. And he just said, there will be no new stadium in Brooklyn. If you want a new stadium, it will have to be in Queens, where Shea Stadium and then Citi Field ended up being. That's where Robert Moses wanted it to be. And as you know, the Dodgers owner got frustrated and upset and moved the team all the way from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, which is the opposite of what Clint did. And if you'd like to hear a joke, there is a joke in Brooklyn that friends of mine have told me for years. They didn't blame Robert Moses, though. They blamed Walter O'Malley, the owner of the Dodgers. So the joke that still thrives in Brooklyn today, if you're in a room with Hitler, Mussolini, and Walter O'Malley, and you have a gun and you have 2 bullets, who do you shoot? And the answer is you shoot O'Malley twice. And that's one thing I think the book reiterates, is that your dad worked so hard to keep the team in Dallas, and he cared about that more than anything. He wanted a pro football team in the beginning because he wanted it in Dallas, and he fought like hell to keep it in Dallas.
Yeah, it was, downtown.
The Dallas area.
Dallas area. But downtown, he never gave up hope to do downtown. But he approached Irving and some of the city officials there kind of out of desperation. And so he was negotiating with both parties simultaneously. But he was trying to always keep it open up to Dallas. And finally just had to do his deal with Irving and walk away. But it was just it's so unfortunate. But he did, in terms of location, he found that 85, 90 acres out there, the convergence of those freeways and stuff, he felt like was the premier site for a stadium in all the metropolitan area. And he found that. He originally optioned it, bought it, and then was required to flip it to Irving for the money that I think he paid $3.2 million. But he flipped it for that same money, even though, like in consolidating, there'd been like 20 landowners of the 85 acres. That consolidation, it's created an enormous value in the piece of the real estate, but it was just part of the transaction, and he had to give up on that. But he felt, in hindsight, he always felt like Dallas was the ideal, but Irving was a great fallback. It was so close to Dallas, so close to the homes of the people that attended the games. He felt very, very positive about the location in the end.
Yeah, and the thing that bemuses me, though, about being an arts writer is at the time, both the mayor and Mr. Cullum said, well, the arts, you can forget the arts. It will always be in Fair Park. And then, ironically, in 1984, the year your dad sold the team, the Dallas Museum of Fine Arts moved downtown, became the Dallas Museum of Art, and that was the beginning of the Dallas Arts District, which is precisely what Clint Jr. had wanted the city to build. The other night, we were having dinner, and my son had just finished the book, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but I'm going to say it anyway. So he says, Dad, I don't understand. He's 26, by the way. He's a bit of a jokester, as he likes to say, when the Cowboys were in an NFC championship game, last in an NFC championship game, much less the Super Bowl, he was, quote, in utero, which is literally true. And I was at that last Super Bowl game, and I took my oldest son, and he reminded me the other day, Dad, the day we went to that Super Bowl, the '96 Super Bowl, Super Bowl 30, when we beat the Steelers, I was 10, and I'm about to turn 38. So there's no laughter. There's only a few tears, I can see. So anyway, let's talk about Jerry Jones, your favorite subject.
There's a song, right? 27 years and
Oh
counting.
yeah, I wish we had thought about figuring out a way to. Yeah, a songwriter friend of mine wrote that for us, but he said he's going to have to change the title from 26 years and counting to 27 years and counting. So we wanted to talk about Mr. Jones just a little bit, and I have to read this from my phone because I couldn't find it in time in the book, and I just hope I don't get a text from one of those sons asking for money. By the way, they could use their own seat option plan. But I'm going to read this portion to you. What the Cowboys founder introduced in the form of seat options at Texas Stadium was a stroke of genius, Jerry Jones said. For the option carried with them the ancillary and, quote, priceless dividend of passing ownership of a single seat from one generation to the next, and the next, and the next. Quote, it lets you reseed the stadium, Jones said, emphasizing the phrase reseed. And yes, Clint introduced that, and yes, it was truly brilliant. And one of the things interesting about doing the research is the second owner, Bum Bright, and the third owner, Jerry Jones, did not see the value of the stadium at all when they initially expressed interest. So I want to ask you two questions. They had to be educated, essentially, by your dad, even though he was gone when Mr. Jones bought the team. Right. But tell me about that education process, how they came to realize that the stadium carried the true value, not really the franchise, and then tell the difference between, in terms of what Jerry is talking about, tell us the difference between the seat option bond and the current thing, which is called a personal seat license.
Right. The personal seat license, which is the way that AT&T Stadium was partially financed, was basically is it gives you the right by buying the seat option, you get the right to I think generally it's like 20 years or something to, in return for buying it, you get that rights to buy the season tickets for that seat for the 20 years that follow. It runs technically it'll run its life, and then I assume he'll just, there'll be new buyers come in, he'll reissue those and shake it up. So that's what he means by reseeding. I mean, it gives them a lot of flexibility to potentially make a lot of money down the road. Dad's was a little different in the sense that it was a bond that you were required to buy a bond, and that bond was returned, 38 years later. That bond, your investment was returned with you, and they never really looked at reseeding because Jones by then had made the decision to move on to Arlington and leave Texas Stadium behind, and which led to its demolition, which was part of. Anyway, that's another story.
Well, but tell us about how the second and third owners had to be educated about the fact that the stadium actually carried more value than the franchise, the team, rather.
Well, yeah, that's what Dad used the stadium as kind of the carrot when he was dealing with Bum Bright and his people, Jim Francis, the right-hand man, and others, in the sense that he showed them by then, that was 1984, by then all the Circle Suites had been sold and whatnot, but he opened their eyes to the fact that you could build a second tier. Those were two levels, but actually maybe a third tier of suites on they call them the crown suites on the very top of the stadium itself, and they're way on up there. But you know, it was something they felt. They spent like $40 million immediately. Did that. I think they bought it. They bought the team in the spring, and by the following season, they had that. They hit the ground running. They actually had that level of suites built and for sale and lease and whatnot. So it was kind of startling to them, the amount of money that could be, you could be garnered out of the sale of those suites and lease of those suites.
Yeah, I want to say this about, we're about ready for the Q&A? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, is that the end? Okay. Sorry, folks. I was hoping we could go to 2 a.m. Is anybody up for that? No?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, guys, we appreciate y'all being here today. Hang on. Hey, Michael, a book will be placed in the McSHAN Elementary Library in both of y'all's honor. Really appreciate you being here. Yep, thank you. Yep, thank you. So, as he said, there's going to be there'll be signing books afterwards, and if you all have any questions that you'd like to ask them at that time, I'm sure they'll be open to us hanging out till 2 a.m. if you'd like. I think my John's might kick you out by then, but anyway, at this time next week, where are we meeting next week? Good. Y'all are good students. Next week, our speaker is going to be Jeff McKISSAK. Mark Neese is our chair. He's going to be talking about a closer look of UFOs. What great timing. Van Oliver, please come up to lead us in the four-way test.
Repeat after me, the four-way test, and all the things that we say and do. First is the truth. Second is fair all concern. Third will build goodwill and better friendships. Fourth will be beneficial to all concerned.
No, ring it. Hit it. There you go. Sorry. Oh, you did great. Appreciate it. Mr. Morlock, how are you, sir?
I'm fine.
You good? You looking good.
Well, thank you. Thank you.